think there is far too much navel-gazing and looking at polls and being scared of political consequences. Stand up, do the right thing, lead, and the politics will take care of itself.
If you don't want to be a problem solver, then you're putting yourself ahead of the movement. You're putting your personal ambition in front of your patriotic duty.
Texas Senator Ted Cruz and Republican Party Chair Reince Priebus disagreeing about how far is too far in opposing President Obama's policies. And we're back now with the panel. There was some commentary this week that the GOP is actually in worse shape with voters now than they were right after the election last November. The argument is that for all the talk about learning lessons, the postmortems, that the GOP has further alienated Hispanics and women and gays, that they're now stuck in this argument about whether or not to try to shut down the government, to defund Obamacare. Senator Brown, do you agree with that?
I believe that Washington as a whole is dysfunctional, that both parties have very serious problems, and that as a party, as a Republican Party, there needs to be room for a Ted Cruz, people like me, Rand Paul, others. We need to have the ability to have and share those great ideas and then find a consensus and move our country forward. What I have found as I travel around the country is that people are tired and fed up of the divisiveness and the lack of putting our country's interest ahead of personal and political interests. So whether they shut down the government, I think that's exactly what Harry Reid and Chuck Schumer want, and that's what the Democrats want in the House, because that'll just show, well, here we go again, the Republicans holding everything up. You're not going to get your paycheck, you're not going to get your paycheck, so, and then they're going to throw it on us. But listen, Obamacare is not good. I voted to get rid of it 3 or 4 times. We have it in Massachusetts. Unions are trying to get out of it. You have everybody trying to get waivers. It's crushing job creation, job growth, and we need to find a way to do it better.
House Republican Speaker John Boehner held a conference call with fellow House Republicans this week. He wants to put off the fight over funding Obamacare by offering a short-term spending bill to fund the government for a couple of months. And Kirsten, the idea seems to be, instead of threatening to shut down the government unless you defund Obamacare in September, get all these issues together and have one big fight over that and the debt limit in November. And clearly he wants to avoid any possibility of shutting down the government, right, exactly because, as Senator Brown says, he thinks it's going to end up hurting Republicans. Do you think that's a smart political idea?
Yeah, I do think look, I think the old guard is definitely right on this, and this is very much the new guard versus the old guard, which I think makes it very interesting when you have Rubio, Rand Paul, Ted Cruz on one side, and McCain, Coburn, Boehner on the other side. But what they're really disagreeing about is tactics. Of course, all Republicans agree you should defund Obamacare. It's just a question of how. And I suspect the new guard probably thinks that if they don't shut down the government, that it's probably not going to get defunded. And while I disagree with them substantively on what they're trying to do, I do think there's something refreshing in the fact that they actually seem to stand up for what they believe, not on just this issue, but I think on a lot of issues. And that is something that, frankly, I can't hardly think of anyone in the Democratic Party who behaves like any of these 3 men who really have sort of challenged the party on a lot of issues.
David, to pick up on this question, the old guard versus the new guard, more conservative Republicans, the so-called Tea Party faction, they say we don't want to put off this fight till November or not have it at all. They wanted to fund Obamacare. They're willing to shut down the government, and they want to have it now. Is that, you can argue whether, obviously, it's the courage of their convictions, but is that going to end up hurting the Republican Party, not helping it?
Well, no one knows. Everyone's trying to determine the outcome of this, Chris. And when you look at the old guard versus the new guard, one of the problems is we've had an old guard in Washington that has become the political class. The political class has been there for 30 years on both sides of the aisle plus, and they have no new voices, no new input. They're just simply functioning within a system that is very big and, frankly, slow to move. Washington, D.C. does not work well with comprehensive anything. Look at Obamacare, comprehensive bills. Look at putting these fights together into one comprehensive fight. Why are we not tackling solutions, finding solutions incrementally on issues, whether it's border security, energy policy, immigration, continuing resolutions? Instead, what we have is a political class, and really in America, it's Americans versus the political class, because we now have basically a group of oligarchs who decide our future based on the old guard, and the new guard or the new voices need to be heard. The Reagan principle. We need a big tent. We need to bring everyone in. This is an American problem, not a Republican or Democrat problem.
But if you're saying, David, that we don't do well with comprehensive reforms, does that also mean that we shouldn't have a comprehensive rollback, that instead of saying defund Obamacare and shut down the government, maybe go after Obamacare in bits and pieces?
Obamacare, you use everything you can in Washington to get rid of it. Incrementally, comprehensively, you use every trick, every tool, because this thing is a train wreck for the American people. And as Senator Brown talked about, whether it's unions, waivers, UPS, all these decisions are being made on Obamacare, and they are hurting our economy. They will continue to hurt our economy, and this thing is a multi-trillion-dollar nightmare down the road. I
want to pick up on that because there were some more big bumps in the road for Obamacare this week. Let's put some of them up. UPS and the University of Virginia say they will no longer cover working spouses because of the cost of health insurance under Obamacare. Some companies say they'll have to raise premiums to cover Obamacare. Delta Airlines said that this could cost them $100 million a year, the increased cost from Obamacare, which raises the question, Juan, forget the politics of the Republican Party. Could just the fact of the implementation of how, when the rubber hits the road, could Obamacare be a big political burden for Democrats? And in that sense, maybe Republicans should just sit back and let it happen.
Well, I think the big problem here is the dysfunction we've been talking about, but it's not with Obamacare. I mean, every major social program that we've had roll out in American history, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, things that are so popular today, they all had bumps in the roads as they were rolled out. They're major programs, and you can anticipate that with Obamacare. But I think Republicans are making a huge mistake if they think this is going to somehow rebound to their benefit. The Wall Street Journal had a poll about 2 weeks ago. Most Americans say, look, you know, this is going to happen. There's no way that you are going to turn this around at this point. There's a Democratic majority in the Senate. There's a President Obama, a Democrat in the White House. They're not going to allow you to defund or do away with Obamacare. That's ridiculous.
This thing isn't a bump in the road. It's a giant sinkhole in the American economy. Look at the reality of how Obamacare was passed. This thing was a party line vote. It was not based on fixing the system. And there's something Americans need to realize here, Chris. While it's only 2,000-something pages, which is ridiculous in nature, the regulations are already somewhere near 19,000 pages. There's no technology to match. They can't make it. This thing is a train wreck.
This is no train wreck. Look, if Republicans were serious, why don't they make it better? 40 votes to try to veto it, not one vote for an alternative which says, here's how we can make
that's not true.
Wait. Give me, you name one program, one time they voted on an absolute alternative.
Let's ask Senator Brown.
With all due respect, when I got there as the 41st senator, we tried to fix it, and they would not bring up all the amendments they brought up. They would not move it forward. The Democrats were lock, stock, and barrel because they knew if we opened up and passed one amendment, then the whole bill would fail. Listen, it's a mess. It's a train wreck. Democrats and Republicans are saying it's a train wreck. Individual states should have the ability to determine the kind of health care they want. The federal government should not be making that determination for the states. It's crushing jobs, 18 new taxes. They're about to click in. We're in deep trouble with it. We should be focusing on our debt, deficit, taxes, spending, jobs, national security.
We've got 20 seconds left. I've got to ask you, you were seen at the Iowa State Fair eating...
Hot dogs are great, Chris. You should try them. Go right to your belly.
Are you going to run? I don't need anything that goes right to my belly. Are you going to run for president in 2016?
Yeah, I'm going to focus on taking my message, as we talked about tonight, of inclusiveness and bigger tent, as obviously our panel here has said, because right now there needs to be room for everybody in our tent in order for us to be effective.
But real quickly, that's not enough.
I'm going to travel around the country and see what happens.
Thank you, panel. See you next week. It was not a no.